Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Ravager. Now this is a DK main tank build. I know it sounds a little weird. Ravager, you know, main tank doesn't sound right. But you'll see why I call it that. Mainly I was running out of names, to be honest. I wanted to call it the Dragon Guard, but it wouldn't fit with the type of build it is, so I didn't want to call it that. And the only thing I had left that I came up with was Ravager. And it's kind of a savage tank kind of thing. So, before I get into too much of this, I do want to do a clarification for those who don't know. All of the builds I am releasing right now are builds to help people get to end game. They are not builds that are made to be main, like in-game tank builds, unless you are comfortable playing the build. I wouldn't make it a main tank build, but they do allow you to play the end game, trials, dungeons, you name it. So these are PvE end game tank builds that I've been releasing over the last week. I've released 8 so far, and I only have 2 left, and that's the DK. So I made a main tank and an off tank for the DK. This happens to be the main tank, the Ravager, as I said, and we're going to go ahead and get right into it right now. So looking at the character's screen, it is an orc. I chose the orc for one of 2 reasons. One, orcs get really good health recovery, like health healing received, and they get health recovery. And the gear set that I chose to wear, one of the gear sets I chose to wear with this, had health recovery. So I figured orc would be the better option besides Nord. So getting into it, you can see we have a 16k magicka, 37k health, 26k stamina. Now, there's a reason why we have such a high stamina, is because of the block cost changes done with Dragon Mode's DLC. It's not as good to build a lot into... It's good to build heavily into that if you're going to play meta, but if you're not playing meta, you don't need as much block cost reduction. You can actually get away with a little bit less block cost reduction and have a bigger pool to compensate. So that's the reason why this build is set up that way. As you can see, we have a 971 magic recovery with a 1018 health recovery. The health recovery is just because of the gear set. Like I said, one of the gear sets I'm running gives you health recovery, and I figured why not utilize it. So I did. Next up, we do have a 41% crit, which is really crazy, but it's also really good that we do. We also have a 1952 weapon damage, because that plays into the build. As you can see, we are unbuffed, guys. 33,480 spell resistance with a 29,000 physical resistance. That's no buffs whatsoever. But it's because of one of the sets we're wearing. So going down here, you can see we are running the Lady Abundant Stone to give us increased resistances. We are using Tri-Stat Food. We do have Major Savagery at all times on both bars, because we are running Expert Hunter from the Fighter's Guild. We also get Major Warden, Major Resolve at all times. So going into the gear, also use Tri-Stat Pots with this. It's the best option. So going into the gear, you guys can probably already tell right out the door, the reason why we have so much resistance is we are running Mighty Chuden. Now I chose the Mighty Chuden for one reason. You don't have to cast Major Ward, Major Resolve. It saves you a skill slot. It saves you resources. So that's why we're not using it. Why we're not using the armor resistance buff is to save resources. Because you cast that every 20 seconds, along with other things, and it really puts a damper on the build. So we are running 3 infused, by the way. The helm, the chest, and the legs are all infused, all tri-stats. Everything else on this is health, enchants, and sturdy. So we're running 4 sturdy on the smaller pieces with health enchants in them. Now I pointed this out in another video. I'm going to point it out again here. If you look at this, with a health enchant you get 386. If I was to put a tri-stat in here, I would actually only get 100 and something out of it, which isn't as good as the 386 from here. This is almost 400 health versus 520 I get here. So that's why I'm running infused on the middle pieces, is to give this tri-stat glyph greater effect. Otherwise it's not even 100 points difference from this. So we are running tri-stat glyphs on the helm, the chest, and the legs, and on the shield. And I'll get to that in a second. So 4 sturdy, 3 infused, and the shield itself is also sturdy. Now there's a reason why I went sturdy on it, is to give it just a little bit more block cost reduction and to help out. So it's a 20% block cost reduction with the setup. You're running 5 sturdy, 3 infused. And as you can see, we still have a lot of resistances to mitigate a lot of damage. So moving on to the main 5-piece, we are running Hunting's Rage. Now that you're probably going, what? Like, why? The reason I chose Hunting's Rage is because, one, it gives us 2 things that are critical. It gives us max stamina, and it increases our weapon damage. That's the main reason why I chose it. Was because of its benefits. But it fits really well with this set, which is Green Pact. And Green Pact gives you 2 things of health, and when you have the food buff active, your max health is increased by 2,441, and your health recovery by 244. That's where all the health recovery is coming from, is from this set. That's it. On the jewelry, we are running 2 magic recovery and 1 weapon damage. Because of the 2 magic recovery and not using like a shield play, that's why we put sturdy on the shields. We are running tri-stats here, and as you guys can see, 434 versus 386. It's better to put a tri-stat in here. It is. That way you get a little bit more magic and health, stamina along with that health. So it just helps out. So that's why we run on the big pieces 4 tri-stats, and on the smaller pieces we run like health enchants or stamina enchants, depending on what way we're playing. So the shields are both sturdy. Like I said on here, 2 magic recovery, 1 weapon damage, and it puts us at almost a 2k weapon damage. If we switch to the back bar, we will go over 2k weapon damage. Just by a little bit. On the sword, main sword, we are using a hardening enchant. This is a cushion to help us tank it in game, so that we can mitigate a little bit more damage, so we can, just so we're not wasting as much resources with blocking. We can actually use this. If you're really good at strategic blocking, this build will be great for you. Next up, we have the Crusher enchant. Now, the reason I've been choosing Crusher on every one of my tanks, a hardening enchant, a Crusher enchant. Crusher doesn't just apply to the group, it also applies to you. The more penetration you have, the more damage you do. So that's why I'm choosing the Crusher enchant on this. Like I said, both shields sturdy with tri-stat enchants. As you guys can see, this build is really, really good. Tanky, has a lot of tankiness to it, has a lot of health, has really good resource pool for stamina. And this is an orc in heavy armor, which orcs get 6% max health, 6% stamina, 5% or 20% health recovery, 5% healing received, and they get 4% melee damage. But there's more to this build than meets the eye. Let's get into the skills. So the skills themselves are really, really standard to what a DK would normally run. But I do want to go over this. When you make a build, doesn't matter what you're playing, tank, healer, DPS, always make sure you fill out all your class passives. Because your class passives, some of them you're going to use, some of them you won't. But always try to fill out your class passives, so that way if you do utilize other skills as you progress through the game, as you can see, out of 300 and something skill points, I have 196 left. And that's unlocking certain crafting skills, things like that, so I can do all this stuff, so I can make this build. I still have 196 skill points left. I still have a lot of skills I can unlock and use. So that's why I say to always unlock your passives. Moving on to the weapons, sword and shield. Make sure you unlock all the sword and shield passives, so you can get the benefits of sword and shield. Moving on down the line into the armor, we are wearing a 5-1-1 setup, so we're wearing 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. And on this build in particular, I'm going to show you guys this. We are using a light belt and a medium helm. Everything else is heavy. So the helm is medium, the belt is light. So you want to make sure you fill out the passives. And there's a reason why you want to make sure you fill out the armor passives especially. Because they do give you minor benefits. Like magic recovery, 4%. 2% reduced cost in magic abilities. and extra resistances, spell resistance. And that's from light armor. From medium armor, you're going to get extra weapon crit. You're also going to get reduced or increased stamina recovery and reduced stamina cost. But you're also going to get athletics, which gives you an increase in your movement speed and a reduction in your dodge roll. So you want to make sure you kind of fill those out. Moving on to the heavy armor, all the passives. The reason you want the passives here, you want the resistances, you want this health recovery of 20%. So being an orc, I get 20%. I get 20% from this. I get, I think, another 20% from my champion points. And then I have another, or 10% from champion points. That's 50% health recovery. And then being a DK, you get health recovery for having certain skills slotted. Now, I don't have one on this bar, but if I swap bars, I do have one of the abilities slotted that gives me another 5% health recovery. And if you look here, even here, you'll see that like it's just a small increase, but it's still enough to make a difference. So moving on through the world skills, I always just fill these two in because they're very beneficial, even though a lot of people don't think they're not. This allows you to recover once every hour without spending a soul gem. This one gives you a 10% chance when you kill an enemy to fill an empty soul gem. So this one allows you to revive without a soul gem. This allows you to fill an empty soul gem. Moving on to the guild skills, Fighter's Guild. Now on this you'll see I have the Expert Hunter on both bars. Because I'm wearing Mighty Chunin, I don't need an extra slot for something. So I traded it out for Expert Hunter. Now on the back bar, I am running Flawless Dawnbreaker. This gives me a 5% increase in my weapon damage. And with the Expert Hunter slotted, as you guys can see, I get 6%. On the front bar, I get 3%. So I can manage a decent weapon damage no matter what bar I'm on. Make sure you get these passives though, and you make sure you get the Banish the Wicked. Now I accidentally actually filled out these bottom two by accident. I didn't mean to. You don't really need them, but they do help. Like Skill Tracker reduces fighter guild abilities. Your fighter guild abilities deal an additional 20% damage to undead, Daedra, and werewolves. That really helps with the Dawnbreaker side, but that's it. And then this allows you to do fighters guild things in Cyrodiil. So just make sure you fill out these top three passives. This one especially, because this gives you 9 ultimate whenever you kill an undead, Daedra, or werewolf. Moving on to the Mages Guild, we want Persuasive Will, and only that for this build. On to the next one, Undaunted. We have Inner Beast unlocked in case we need it. It's just there if we need it. But make sure you fill out these two passives. These are really important passives. So moving on to the Alliance, we have the Assault skill, Aggressive Warhorn. I do have Resolving Vigor, and I can replace it if I need to with this, like for dungeon play. But otherwise, I'm going to use my Green Dragon's Blood, because this gives me more health recovery and stamina recovery, and it also grants me minor vitality, which increases my healing received by 8%. So, moving on to the back bar, you can unlock these. Now, these are up to you if you want to unlock them. Honestly, with this build, you really don't have the resources to use Purge, or you can use this in place of Dawnbreaker, but Purge you really don't have any place for. So, moving on down the line, make sure you fill out the racial passives. Like I said, the Orc gets 6% max health and stamina. I just chose it because I thought it would be cool. And Unflinching, the 5% healing received health recovery because of the race, benefit, kind of helps. And then, of course, this one as well, the Swift Warrior. The 4% melee attacks really helps this build. And then the reduced cost of sprint and increased movement speed. Remember I was showing you guys that with the medium armor passive, you get a 13% increase in movement speed, so it's kind of nice. And then moving on down here, make sure you just fill out this medicinal use and provisionings, Gourmand, and Carnosaur. Now I do want to show you guys this. The reason all my skill points are so low, like my use, is because I do fill out all of these ones so I can craft stuff on the PTS, so I can make the gear that these characters are wearing. Like if you look here at this, I made this with this character, created by DK Main Tank. So I utilize those skill points to give me the greater benefit of having the gear I craft, and I can just craft it with the character I'm playing. So, going back over the skills, now we're going to go over the skill bars. On the main bar, we have Unrelenting Grip. Now, this is great, a great ability. It does take Magicka, but if you look, it does 2k fire damage when it hits. It grants you major expedition, but it also returns the Magicka cost if the enemy can't be pulled. So, out here in this area, if I go to use the chains on this giant, it will not work. See, it doesn't work on them because they're an elite mob. They don't get that. They don't work that way. So, just gonna kill this guy off real quick. Oops. I have a tendency to hit chains. It's just a habit of mine. So, back to the skills. We have chains to pull enemies, and it's mostly only going to work on trash mobs. When you're in a trial, you can actually drop this if you want, and you can grab the Sword and Shield's Shielded Assault. So that way you get a small damage shield when you charge enemies. Because chains really doesn't work in there. You can also trade it out for the Undaunted Taunt, Inner Beast. So, it's up to you. Moving on to the next skill, we are using Pierce Armor. Pierce Armor applies Major Breach and Major Fracture, but it also does a small amount of damage. As you can see, that's a 5k amount of damage that it does, but it also taunts the enemy for 15 seconds. Now remember, the Minor Breach and Minor Fracture only lasts 12, so you do need to apply this every 12 seconds to keep it up. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, why aren't you using the class's own damage shield? Now, I know this damage shield, when you activate it, we'll go ahead and do the normal Igneous Shield like people use, and I'll show you guys the reason. So, Igneous Shield is a really good, oops, let me wear that off. Igneous Shield is a really good group support shield. So is the other one, Fragmented Shield, is really good for that. But if you're utilizing it, this is the thing you have to understand. When you're playing a stamina build, this doesn't really benefit you, okay? Yes, it gives you a damage shield. It's a really good damage shield. It gives you major mending. But other than that, it doesn't really benefit you. It benefits your group. And as a tank, sometimes benefiting your group is good, sometimes it's not. In this case, look at this. That is a 12k damage shield, and it lasts for 6 seconds. Really good damage shield, pretty decent, I'm not going to lie. But now let me show you why I use Bone Shield. First off, Bone Shield, anytime I'm hit, my character's hit, it absorbs 36% of my max health, and it deals 39% of the damage absorbed back to the enemy using a melee attack. So any enemy that hits me with a melee attack, they take 39% of the damage back at them. That's the reason why I run Bone Shield. But it's also 36% of my max health. So when I activate it, that's a 13.6k damage shield versus the 12k the other one did. So Bone Shield actually works better if you're playing a stamina tank. Now if you're playing a Magicka tank, Igneous Shield or Fragmented Shield, 10 times better. But I'm not a Magicka tank, I'm a stamina tank. So this works better for me. So let's go back in and take a look at the rest of the skills. Moving on, we have Absorb Magic. The benefits of this is pretty good. Defensive Posture, or the Defensive Posture ability, is good. The Wild Slotted thing is good. The other things, and it's only situational. So you're not going to be using activating this ability a lot. It's going to be situational. Now, if you guys don't know, tanks focus on doing damage through light and heavy attacks. So that's why we don't need a lot of skills on our bar. But if you look at this ability, the Wild Slotted thing, that's what you need it here for. This is your main tank bar. So while you're main tanking, you get reduced or increase the amount of damage you can block by 8%, and you reduce the amount of your block cost by 8%. Moving on, we have Expert Hunter or Evil Hunter. This just increases our crit chance, and that's the only reason why we have it. Now, in some situations, if you want to activate the ability, you can, so you can see hidden targets, but you're only going to use that in PvP, to be honest. And yes, this build does work in PvP. Moving on to the next one, Aggressive Warhorn. Now this is a really, really essential ability for tanks to use because it does offer some group support. Max Magicka, Max Stamina, Minor Toughness, 10% increase to all three of your Magicka, Stamina, and Health. Really good, especially in the end game. Getting those greater resource pools really saves your group a lot of stuff. So, and it also grants Major Force for 9.5 seconds, almost 10 seconds, increasing critical damage done by 15%. There's a reason why I made this build the way I did, guys. With a 41% crit chance, I get greater ability to crit. When I get greater ability to crit, this minor force or major force also applies to me as well. So it's just a little bit of extra damage I can do for the group. Moving on to this back bar, and this is where things kind of pan out, and you guys will see why I use Chuden. So Chuden takes up when I'm not running Chuden, I was running this Spiked Armor. And Spiked Armor is great and all, but it uses a lot of Magicka. Being a stamina tank, I can't utilize a lot of Magicka. I can't waste the resources. And if I have Igneous Shield, I can't waste the resources. So that's why, if you notice, I have Choking Talons here. Now, you can swap out Green Dragon's Blood for Choking Talons, or even Reverberating Bash for Choking Talons. But again, it's 4K Magicka. The DK is a magic hog. Every ability they have is magic intensive. Unless you're using the 2 stamina morphs they have throughout the class. Otherwise, this is a very magic extensive class. And if you don't utilize magic recovery, it really can really put a damper on your thing. So with this, you do have Choking Talons available if you need it. So here we have Reverberating Bash. Since we're a stamina build, stamina skills. Reverberating Bash does apply a Major Defile. Now, Major Defile you're not going to be using a lot, okay? But it does help in a lot of situations because there is a lot of healing that goes on in dungeons and trials. There's a lot of healing that goes on with certain bosses. And being able to mitigate that healing effect is why you want Reverberating Bash, is to reduce the healing effect so you can kill things quicker. So that's why I have Reverb Bash on here, and it does apply Major Defile. It also stuns enemies as long as they're not elite mobs and they're just trash. You can stun them for 3 seconds. Saves some, it does a little CC. Next up we have Heroic Slash. Heroic Slash is a really, really powerful ability. As you can see, without a buff to my weapon damage, it does 6,015 damage. If I crit with this, it's going to hit for about 9k. So it's really kind of a powerful ability. It also applies Minor Maim and reduces their movement speed by 60% for 12 seconds. Minor Maim reduces the damage they do by 15%. So you want to kind of keep this applied as much as possible. Now, this ability also grants you Minor Heroism, which grants you one ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 9 seconds. So that's good for you to have, so you can keep Warhorn more active, or even in dungeons, you can fire Flawless Dawnbreaker off more active. Next up, we have Green Dragon's Blood. We're using this as a heal. So the more damage you take, the bigger the heal this is. So if you take a lot of damage, say you're down to like 26% health, and you fire this off, you're going to get a huge chunk of health back. The heal is 36% of your missing health, and then you also get with it when you activate it, you gain Major Fortitude and Major Endurance and Minor Vitality. So this not only increases your health and stamina recovery, it also gives you that minor that healing received. Remember, orcs get 5% healing received. With that 8%, that's 13% healing received. In heavy armor, you get another 8%. That's 21% healing received. Being a DK, while a Draconic Power is active, your healing received is increased by 12%. Now that was 31%, or we were 21% already. 12% on top of that. That's 33% healing received. DKs are the masters of healing received. Also, for having a thing slotted, you get 5% health recovery. You also get Iron Skin, which is amazing because this increases the amount of damage you can block by 10%. Now, a lot of people say, oh, DKs can block 50% of the damage. They cannot block 50% of the damage. At most, they can block 38% of the damage. 38, that's it. Unless you're wearing, give me a second. Unless you're wearing, unless you have one of the passives. Now, you can get over that with the Sword and Shield passive, deflecting bolts. You do block more projectiles and ranged attacks, but that's it. So DKs are really great at tanking, but they just because they get this passive doesn't make them the best tank in the world. They're really resource extensive. So some races are better at playing DKs than others. Like Dark Elves are pretty good at playing DKs, but only for the damage benefit. Magic recovery wise, they suck. Playing an Argonian is really good to play one as because they have really good resource management through potions, but potions have cooldowns. So it makes it really hard for them to manage their resources as a DK. Even playing a High Elf is really unmanageable as a DK. Do you know what the best race to play DK with is? The Breton. But let's continue on. And the reason the Breton's best is because they get 3% reduced magic costs. They don't get magic recovery. They get that greater reduced cost, which makes it easier to manage these abilities because they're so heavy on magic use. Alright, so moving on. The next ability we have is Igneous Weapons. Now, Igneous Weapons gives you both major sorcery and major brutality, increasing both spell and weapon damage by 20% for nearly 40 seconds. But it doesn't just apply to you. It applies to your whole entire group. So you can cast this in a dungeon and in a trial, and guess what? People don't have to use power pots as often, except for the crit bonus and the recovery. Other than that, guess what? This is going to be more effective for them because it's going to allow them to have that weapon and spell damage up all the time. Now, this costs 4k magicka, so you got to really watch your magicka use here. You're going to pop that, and you're going to use this, and that is it. Your chains, you're going to use selectively. Because otherwise, you're going to burn through a lot more resources than you need to. So just watch your resource use with this build, especially at the fact that you've got some long-lasting abilities, and you want to keep those long-lasting abilities up as much as you can. So when you see this ability getting ready to come off, like it is now, it's 7 seconds, 6, 5, 4. I usually pop it off at 2 seconds. Then it goes right back up, and I get that long time of that increased weapon damage. Now, the other thing that's cool about casting this ability is you also apply Mountain's Blessing. When you cast an Earth and Heart ability, you and your group members within 30 meters gain minor brutality for 20 seconds. You increase both weapon damage. You increase their weapon damage by 5%. Now, you also generate 3 ultimate, which helps you generate ultimate in a dungeon, but you don't want to spam this. This is why a lot of people use Igneous Shield, is they recast it every 8 or 6 seconds so they can generate more ultimate. That's just, honestly, unless you're playing a Magicka tank, just kind of useless on this build. Next up, we have Evil Hunter again. This increases our crit chance and gives us 3% more weapon damage. And then Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now, Flawless Dawnbreaker is great especially if you're playing through. Have any of you played DSA? DSA, there's a lot of Dragon Star Arena. There's a lot of ads that you have to fight, like rounds of ads, until you get to the final round where you fight the boss. Then you start a new arena, and you got to play through rounds of ads and get to the final boss. This is a great ability for that because you can drop that Flawless Dawnbreaker and help with DPS a lot, especially when you buff up with your weapon damage. And your Flawless Dawnbreaker is hitting for 8k over 5 seconds, and it does 10k up front almost. So it's a really beneficial thing for you to have it as a main tank, especially in things like DSA or dungeons. You can get a little bit more damage out there, help your group with damage. It's just really good. And that's it for the skills. Now let's jump into the champion points. Going over the champion points, there's a lot of things in here that you're going to notice that I did a little differently than I normally do. But you're going to notice that I just basically use the same setup on a lot of the tanks. So starting over here, we get 37 in Ironclad. This is a 15% damage reduction from direct damage. Moving on to Thick Skin. Thick Skin reduces the damage you take by 15% from damage over time effects. Excuse me. And then moving on, we have 43 and 43 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. These give us both 10% damage reduction from poison, disease, and physical. And this one, Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic. So this is what you want to focus on as a tank when you first get into your CP system. Start focusing on this first before you focus on anything else. Next up, we're going to the last and final tree of the red, and we are going to start with Bastion. This is where you're going to want to put 56 points. This is going to give you 20% increase into all your damage shields. And this includes the hardening one you have on your sword and shield, the bone shield, and even that one shield that you have for absorb magic. All those are boosted by 20%. This helps you manage, like, get those greater damage shields so they last through the 6 seconds in most encounters. Now in vet dungeons, the damage shields are going to work really good. In trials, damage shields are, it's all about timing. It's just like blocking. It's all about timing. You want to use your damage shields when the bigger hits are coming in, along with block. You can mitigate a lot more damage that way, because first it has to strip that damage shield. And if your damage shield's big enough, for example, if your damage shield's big enough, oops, oh my god, really? I might have to find something bigger to hit, so. But if your damage shield's big enough, you get an 18k, almost 19k damage shield with this and your sword and shield hardening enchant. So between the two, that's like a 19k damage shield. 19k, they have to absorb that first. They have to remove that 19k first before they can do actual damage to you. So if they hit you for 50k, for example, 19,000 has just been removed. When you block a percentage, you know, a certain amount of that damage. You reduce a certain amount of that damage. Then your resistances kick in, reduce the damage even more. Then your reduction kicks in and reduces the damage the rest. You can actually have like an 86% damage mitigation. And with 86% damage mitigation, on top of that 19,000, you can pretty much mitigate almost all the damage down to nothing. Not zero, but like really low, to where you hardly take anything. This is why it's good to use damage shields and blocking tactically. Now, when you're blocking something like, say, axes or something like that in a trial, there's some classes that are better at it than others. No offense. But it's just a matter of utilizing your skills and stuff and utilizing your resources. So just make sure you have a full pool of resources before you start blocking the axes. And if you need resources, drink a potion. Just drink a potion. Don't. And if you need it, ask for a spear shard. But other than that, this build is not going to be a resource. It's not going to be resource stressed if you know how to manage your resources with it. A lot of heavy attacks, things like that. So that's why we have 56 in the Bastion, so increase our damage shield strength. Next up, we have 16 in Expert Defender. This gives you, increases your light and heavy attack, or reduces light and heavy attack damage you take by 10%. Remember, a lot of enemies in this game do light and heavy attacks. So mitigating that damage by a greater amount is going to be more effective for you and your group. Moving on to the next tree, we are going to look at the Warden or Warlord first, and 23 points in here. This is going to give you 10% reduced break free cost. Anything you can do to save resources, always do it. And the reason why is because you don't want to be wasting resources. If you don't have any break free costs, it's like 3k. Anything you can reduce that by any amount saves you resources. And that's why we have 23 points in there. Next, we have 16 into bashing focus. This just reduces our cost of bashing by 10%. If you guys don't know, a lot of times tanks do this. They'll be fighting something, and next thing you know, they need to bash something because they see that them getting ready to do a special attack or something. They'll bash them, and it'll interrupt them and set them off balance. So that's something you can do. So that's why having that reduced cost here really helps out. It saves you resources. Moving on over here, and like I said, I put 43 into health recovery. That gives me an extra 10% health recovery. Wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor is 20%. Being an orc is 20%. So that's 40%. Plus this is 50%. Plus the extra 5%. That's 55% health recovery. No, it's not much. But that 1,000 health every few seconds really saves on the healer some. Because they're not going to have to cast as many heals, like dot heals, on you. Because you're going to be healing yourself every 2 seconds for 1,000 health. Moving on to Arcanist. I did put 43 into here because I need that little bit of extra to get that magic recovery a little higher, so that way I'm not wasting magicka and I can get some back. Because when I do drink a pot, my magic recovery actually goes to 1,141, and then if I switch bars, you notice like my health recovery still pretty decent. And then my magic recovery just stays in there. So that's really good for me, and it lasts 45 seconds. So this is going to keep me for 45 seconds with major intellect, endurance, and fortitude. And even if I use this, it doesn't stack with the potions. It just refreshes minor vitality or minor fortitude and minor endurance. So as you can see, the intellect's getting ready to wear off. And once that intellect wears off, I can drink another potion. So you definitely want to make sure you're utilizing those things to get the greater effect. So that's why that's important. Next up is Tenacity. Now, I only have 43 points in here, which gives me 10%. So I actually only have a 65% return of stamina from my heavy attacks. So that's why this build needs heavy attacks. This is why you have those damage shields, is so you can pull off some heavy attacks and get those resources back. Now, 65% of your max stamina pool, not your or recovery or whatever, it's not your recovery number. You actually get 65% of your resources back. It's kind of weird how it works, but you get a lot back. You get almost 3K back. So, moving on to this tree, we have 56 in the Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 20%. Now, a lot of people like to put 74 in here, but honestly, going from 56 to 74 to get 4%, to me, is kind of like, that's just like, I don't want to waste the points. I really don't. Because I can put those points into other things, like 10 points into Befoul, 6 points into Tumbling. I can actually utilize points on a Warlord and Bashing Focus instead of trying to get this up to 25% or 24%. So I like to save my resources here for other things. So that's why I only put 56 points into Shadow Ward as on any of my tanks. So moving on, 10 into Befoul. This increases the effectiveness of healing reduction ability. So Major Defile from Reverberating Bash gets a 10% increase. So it goes from 30% to 33%. And then 6 points into Tumbling. This reduces your dodge roll. And I've mentioned this before, but like 6% from, or 4% from wearing one medium, and then 2% from here saves you 6% of your resources. It's not much, but it does make a difference. Moving on to the final tree, which is the Mage Tree. This is your damage focus tree. So we have 43 into Bless. This increases healing done by 10%. This includes your Green Dragon's Blood. When you activate it, it actually heals for more. So, moving on to the middle tree. Remember, tanks focus on light and heavy attack damage. They use abilities to apply effects, mostly. So, applying effect, doing damage. Doing damage with light and heavy. So, this tree, the Anorak tree, is really good for tanks because it gives them the greater benefit of light and heavy attack damage. Tanks don't do uber DPS. They really don't. But they can do damage. And the more damage they can bring to the group, overall, the more damage the group does. Now, whether it be in a dungeon on a 1.8 million health boss or in a trial on a 35 million vet boss, the more damage being done by the total group, the faster the boss dies. So we put 35 points in here to increase our light and heavy attack damage by 20%. We put another 56 into here, increasing our direct damage done, which all light and heavy attacks are direct damage. That is 40% damage done. That's a lot of damage. and it's not like, oh, I'm so powerful I can just destroy everything. It's just a lot of damage. Moving on to Shattering Blows. Now, this one a lot of people don't utilize in PvE because they don't realize how many enemies do have damage shields. And the more damage you can get through those shields, the easier it is to kill them. Arx Cranium, final boss, uses a damage shield. The middle boss in Arx Cranium, the one with the big dome, she has a damage shield. Several bosses throughout the game, several enemies throughout the game use damage shields. So having this, just at 10%, helps a lot. Alright. You also get some really great passives here, like Retaliation. Whenever you block a heavy attack, your light attacks used within 7 seconds deal 30% additional damage. So if you block a heavy attack, usually you set them off balance and you interrupt them, which we'll get to in a second, but that's 30% more damage that gets added to that 40%. So that light attack can actually do 70% more damage. You also get Reposit, which is super, super important for a tank to have, because anytime you are hit by a melee attack, anytime you block a melee attack, and you block it, you have a 15% chance to deal 5k damage, but roughly, to the enemy. Now, I say 5k because when my weapon damage is increased, it's 5k. It's almost 6k damage that I can redirect back at him. And that can happen every 5 seconds. So it's just another way for me to redirect damage, especially when tactically blocking. Because I block, I'm losing that chance to get an attack off. So I block it, I get a chance to do some damage back. It's not a lot. Like I said, 5k is nothing. But when you add up the tank's total damage, now, and I've done this in dungeons and in trials. Here recently when I ran through Wayrest Sewers, I have my tank set up similar to this. And when I got done with Wayrest Sewers, the final boss, in Path 1, on vet mode, actually hard mode, she has 5.6 or 5.8 million health. Out of that 5.8 million, I did 1 million of it myself as a tank. So if I can do 1 million damage out of 5.8 million, that's really good. And I'm just saying, that was really good. Alright, next up you also get Butcher, which increases light and heavy attack damage when the enemy's below 25% health by 5%. So not only do you get that 40%, but you get another 5% when they're below health. And this is why on my tank I run Kvetch's Gladiator, is because I get 1800 more weapon damage, which makes my weapon damage insane with my light and heavy attacks. But what happens at 25% health on most bosses? They go into what's called an enrage phase. And when they do that, they're gonna go crazy, and you want to kill them fast. Well, having this there really helps you just bring a little bit more damage in that rage phase. Now, this is also really good for DPS, but having a DPS put 75 points into this tree can really, really mess up their overall point distribution. So, tanks get a better use out of it. But moving on to the final and last tree of the champion point system, we're going to put 43 points into Mighty. Now, this increases physical, poison, and disease damage. Light and heavy attacks, physical damage. 10% more? Sure, I'll take it. Because now I'm doing 50% damage, more damage with my light and heavy attacks. And if I happen to crit, not only does my crit get increased by 50% damage, so I'm getting 50% more damage, plus another 50%. That's 100% more damage. from my light and heavy attacks if I crit. But I can also get an extra 10 in there. So I go from 100% more damage together to 110% more damage because of all these other bonuses. The more damage I can produce for myself, the more it works for the group. Now, next up, I also have 17 points on Piercing Strikes. This gives me an extra spell or physical penetration, just increasing my capability of getting more damage out there. Now, this is where things get funny. Remember what I was talking about when you set an enemy off balance? And you get this, or you block their heavy attack, it sets them off balance, and it gives you, and it interrupts them. Well, if you look over here, we get two things, Opportunist and Exploiter. Opportunist, when you interrupt an enemy, your next physical damage attack or ability used within 7 seconds is increased by 15%. And guess what a physical damage ability also requires to? A light or heavy attack. So that light attack that you do now is increased by 15%. So that 100 and something percent that I already told you guys about just got another 15% added to it. And you have a chance of setting them off balance, which gives you another 10% increase in damage. We are talking about almost 200% damage increase. Because you get 30% extra damage on that light attack, you get 15%, 10%, all those other bonuses. That's insane. And if you crit, you're looking at like almost a 15k hit with one light attack. This is why it's really, really, really important that the tank builds this way. They bring extra damage to the group. It's not a whole lot, but it can be enough in the end to amplify the group's damage by a greater amount. Because this isn't just about, oh, I can do X amount of DPS as a DPS. I can do X amount of DPS as a DPS. It's about the group. The whole entire group. And if your whole group isn't working together, then there's no reason to have a tank that does that's even in the group. You just grab a DPS, throw a taunt on them, put sword and shield, you'd be better off. But with this, the tank can actually bring some DPS. It's not a lot. Like I said, we're talking 2 to 3, 4K max per second. But that 4K per second, like I said, adds up. And with all the different benefits they have at exploiting damage, because they get exploited, they get opportunists, they get the other thing over here, the retaliation, they get reposit. They get all these different benefits. And a lot of those benefits is ways that they can indirectly deal damage or directly deal damage at a greater amount. And that's why utilizing the champion point system to your advantage, regardless if you're a DPS, a tank, or a healer, the more you can get out of it, the better. And that is the Ravager. Now you guys know why I called it the Ravager, is because everything about this class is about not just dealing massive damage. It's about getting in and making sure the stuff gets done fast. And I'm not kidding when I say fast. Like, you want to get in, you want to get a dungeon run fast, this thing can help you do that in a big way. See, if you watch, I'm doing 9k heavy attacks right there. If I get a heroic slash off and it crits, that's 9k. Now, if you watch my DPS per second, I'm going to do this just to show you guys. That right there was 5k damage per second I was doing. 5k damage per second isn't a lot. But when you add it up in a trial, along with all your other people in your group, that can add up to be a lot more damage. Now, a main tank can never do as much damage as an off tank. Most off tanks can pull anywhere between 12 to 15k DPS. And that's if they're not tanking. And they're not tanking 100% of the time. So any amount of damage you can bring extra to the group with your 2 tanks, your 2 healers in that trial, the better off your group is at getting things done. And like I said, tanks don't do a lot of damage, but a lot of people like to play their tanks in open world. These builds that I've just released over this last week, they actually allow that. They allow people to play in dungeons, trials, and in open world and play the quests. I have a lot of friends of mine who say, well, you know, I have a main tank, but I can never play them because they just suck at doing damage. This doesn't suck at doing damage. It does better damage than your tank because I built them to be that way. Now, before I go any further and I go into the next, telling you guys what the next build is, which I'll just tell you right now, is the Dragon Guard. It's the new advanced version Dragon Guard. I want to tell you guys why I made these 10 tank builds the way I did. You know what? I got a better idea. Watch for Sunday, and you guys will see why. Sunday, I'm going to be releasing a video that explains the 10 tank builds that I made and the reason why I made them the way I did. Next week, I will be releasing 10 healer builds. They're going to be 5 healers, 5 support characters. The support characters are healers, by the way. And these are builds that I have built and tested, not only in dungeons, but trials as well. Some have been tested in just dungeons. Some have been tested in trials and dungeons. But they are tested, and they do work. Just like these tank builds have been tested, and they do work. The only one I haven't tested out of all the tanks in a trial was this one. I've tested this in a dungeon. I tested it last night. It worked amazing. Worked awesome in the new dungeons. By the way, devs, great job on the new dungeons. So, other than that, the next build I will be releasing today is the other DK build, which is the Dragon Guard. And it is going to be cool. I hope you guys like that one. It brings something new to the table that's not been seen, except from me. So I hope that you guys like it. And it's a fun build. It's one I actually play a lot of. So I actually play this live. This is a build I use on live. And it's called the Dragon Guard. But that's it for the Ravager, guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed this build video. If you guys did, it'd be greatly appreciated if you hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or just other videos by me, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.